The sky wasn't just grey, it was a bruised, heavy purple that looked like it was about to collapse under its own weight. And when the rain started, it didn't just fall, it turned into needles of ice that sawed out every gap in your armor. Most people were tucked away in their warm living rooms, complaining about the heating bill, but out on 4th Street, the world had forgotten its most precious passenger. I've seen a lot of cold things in my years on the road, betrayals, abandoned towns, and hearts made of stone, but nothing prepares you for the sight of a 9-year-old boy standing under a rusted bus stop overhang, his small body shaking so hard you could hear his teeth chattering over the hum of the freezing wind. He was wearing a light hoodie that was soaked to the bone, clinging to his frame like a second skin of ice. His backpack was heavy, dragging his shoulders down as he peered into the darkness of the road, looking for a pair of headlights that were never going to show up. People talk about bad neighborhoods and dangerous streets, but the most dangerous thing in this city isn't a man with a gun. It's a mother who decides her child is a burden she no longer wants to carry. They think that because it's a public place, someone will eventually find them. They think they can just wash their hands of the responsibility and drive off into the night. But they forget that the Motor Mafia doesn't follow a schedule, and we don't look the other way when the innocent are left to freeze. My name is Jax, and I was leading a pack of 41 brothers back from a cross-state run. We were exhausted, our leather was stiff with frost, and all we wanted was the warmth of the clubhouse. But as my headlight swept across that bus stop, I saw a flash of a bright blue sneaker, the kind a kid wears. I raised my hand, signaled the halt, and 41 heavy engines cut out in perfect unison. The silence that followed was terrifying. It was the silence of a street that had watched a crime happen and said nothing. I kicked my stand down and walked toward the bench. The boy didn't run. He didn't even look up at first. He just kept staring at the road, his face a ghostly shade of blue, his fingers tucked into his armpits to find a spark of heat. "Hey, little man," I said, my voice sounding like gravel in the quiet night. "You're a long way from home for a night like this." He looked at me then, and his eyes, they weren't full of tears. They were full of a terrifying, hollow loyalty. "I have to stay here," he whispered, his voice cracking from the cold. "My mum said. She said the bus for the special school comes at midnight. She said she'd be right back with my dinner, but I can't leave the stop or I'll miss my chance." I looked at my watch. It was 11:45 p.m. There are no buses at midnight on this route. There is no special school that picks up kids in the middle of a freezing rainstorm. I looked at the brothers standing behind me, 41 men who have faced down the worst the world has to offer, and I saw 41 hearts break at the same time. We didn't just find a lost kid, we found a boy who had been discarded like trash on a Tuesday night. If you've ever felt the sting of being left behind, or if you believe that a child's trust is the most sacred thing on this earth, hit that like button right now. Don't let the shadows hide the truth. Drop a P-rotacy in the comments if you want to see exactly what 41 bikers do when they realize this wasn't an accident, it was an execution of a mother's duty. We've found the boy, but now the hunt for the truth begins. I didn't just stand there and take his word for it. In the Motor Mafia, we've learned that the world is built on stories, but the truth is usually hidden in the details people try to bury. I reached out and gently touched the boy's shoulder. He was freezing, his muscle fibers vibrating with a frantic, rhythmic intensity as his body tried to generate even a spark of warmth. I signaled to Biggs and Hammer. Without a word, they moved. Biggs unzipped his heavy, fur-lined parka and wrapped it around the kid, whose name we soon found out was Leo, while Hammer produced a thermos of black coffee, tempered with enough sugar to kickstart a dead engine. As Leo took a sip, his small, blue-tinged hands shaking against the metal cup, I noticed a corner of wet paper sticking out of his hoodie pocket. It was soaked, the ink beginning to bleed into the fabric. I reached out, my eyes asking for permission. Leo nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the empty road where he expected his mother's sedan to reappear. I pulled the paper out and smoothed it against the leather of my thigh. It wasn't a grocery list. It wasn't a be back soon note. It was a letter of resignation from motherhood. The handwriting was shaky, but the message was a cold-blooded spear to the chest. It said, "To whoever finds him, I can't do this anymore. He needs more than I have. He's a good boy, but I'm empty. Please give him the life I can't." There was no name, no phone number, just a final, cowardly goodbye left in a pocket to be found by a stranger or a coroner. I felt the air in my lungs turn to liquid fire. I've seen some low-down things, men who would sell their souls for a fix, brothers who turned their backs on the patch, but I had never seen a woman leave her soul on a rusted bench in the freezing rain. I looked back at the brothers. 41 men stood there, their shadows long and jagged under the flickering streetlights. Not a single engine was running, yet the air felt like it was humming with a collective, mounting fury. "Hammer," I said, my voice sounding like a blade being drawn across a stone. "Get the kid in the support van. Crank the heat to max. Give him the emergency blankets and every bit of food we have left from the run. Biggs, get on the horn. I want the description of every vehicle registered to a Sarah Miller, the name on Leo's school bag tag, within a 50-mile radius. I don't care about the law. I don't care about the hour. Find her." Leo looked up as Biggs lifted him toward the van. As my mum coming back Jack's. I looked him straight in those trusting, innocent eyes. I couldn't tell him the truth yet, that the woman who gave him life had just traded him for a chance to run. "We're going to find her, Leo. I promise you. We're going to find her and make sure she understands exactly what she left behind." The hunt began at 12:15 a.m. Most people think a motorcycle club is just a bunch of guys riding for the thrill, but the Motor Mafia is a network. Within 10 minutes we had a make, a model, and a partial plate. She wasn't just gone, she was fleeing. She had a 3-hour head start, heading north toward the border, thinking the rain and the dark would wash her tracks clean. She thought she had vanished into the night. She didn't realize that she had left a trail of broken trust that 41 heavy-duty engines were now tracking with the precision of a bloodhound. We didn't ride like we were on a charity run. We rode like a pack of wolves. The freezing rain turned to sleet, lashing against our visors, turning the highway into a sheet of black glass, but no one throttled back. We pushed those bikes until the metal screamed, our formation tight, our headlights cutting through the fog like tactical lasers. We checked every rest stop, every 24-hour diner, every seedy motel where a woman with a guilty conscience might try to hide until morning. 2 hours in, my hands were numb, the cold seeping through my reinforced gloves, but every time I felt like slowing down, I thought of Leo. I thought of those blue sneakers and the way he'd waited for a midnight bus that was never coming. I thought of that note in his pocket, and I twisted the throttle harder. "Jax, this is Hammer." The radio crackled in my ear, barely audible over the wind. "Check the way station at mile marker 82. We've got a visual on a silver sedan with a mismatched rear bumper. It's her. She's pulled over, probably waiting out the worst of the sleet." I felt a grim, cold satisfaction settle in my gut. "Copy that. Don't engage yet. Form a perimeter. I want her to wake up and realize that the world isn't as empty as she thought it was." As we approached the way station, we cut our lights. 41 bikes glided into the parking lot like ghosts in the dark. We surrounded that silver sedan in a perfect, suffocating circle. The engine of her car was still ticking as it cooled. Inside, a woman was slumped against the steering wheel, her eyes closed, probably dreaming of the new life she thought she'd bought by abandoning her son. I stepped off my shovel head and walked toward the driver's side window. I didn't knock. I didn't shout. I just stood there in the freezing rain, my shadow falling across her face. If you think this mother is about to get a polite conversation, you don't know the Motor Mafia. We spent 6 hours in a frozen hell to find the woman who forgot what it means to be human. Hit that like button if you're ready for the confrontation that's about to shatter her world. Subscribe and hit the bell, because part 3 is where the debt gets called in, and believe me, the interest on a child's tears is higher than she can ever pay. Drop a nose key in the comments if you want to see her face when she realizes 41 Baps just caught up to her. I didn't tap on the glass. I didn't need to. The sheer, collective weight of 41 idling engines began to vibrate the frame of her car, a low-frequency hum that rattled the loose change in her console and shook the very air in her lungs. Sarah Miller's eyes snapped open. For a second, she looked confused, peering through the fogged up glass at the wall of black leather and chrome that had materialized out of the storm. Then, she saw me. She saw the Motor Mafia patch on my chest and the cold, unblinking stare of a man who had just spent 2 hours racing through a frozen nightmare because of her. She scrambled for the lock, her fingers fumbling with the plastic tab, but it was already too late. I leaned my weight against the door, and the sheer presence of the Brotherhood seemed to pin the vehicle to the asphalt. I signaled to Hammer. He stepped forward and tapped a single, Heavy ring against the driver's side window. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet of the way station. Slowly, the window rolled down. The air that escaped the car was warm, smelling of cheap air freshener and the stale remains of a fast food meal she'd bought for herself. While her son was eating ice crystals at a bus stop, she looked up at me, her face pale, her eyes darting toward the gear shift. "Is there a problem, officer?" she stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "I'm not an officer, Sarah," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous vibrating bass. "Officers follow a handbook. They have to read you your rights. They have to wait for a warrant. I don't have to do any of those things. I'm just a man who found a blue sneaker and a suicide note for a childhood sitting on a bench at 4th and Main." She froze. The confused traveler act died right there. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked past me at the circle of bikes, realizing that every exit was blocked by 300 pounds of American steel and men who looked like they were made of the same stuff. I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, though her voice was shaking so hard she could barely get the words out. "I'm just driving to see my sister. I don't have a son." "That's funny," Biggs growled, stepping into the light of the way station's overhead lamp. He held up the wet, ink-stained note I'd taken from Leo's pocket. "Because this paper says you have a son named Leo. It says you think he's a good boy. It says you're empty. Well, Sarah, we're here to fill that void with a little bit of reality." I reached inside the car and turned off her ignition. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the roar of the engines. "Get out of the car, Sarah. Now! You can't do this! This is kidnapping!" she shrieked, clutching the steering wheel. "No," I said, leaning in until our noses were inches apart. "Leaving a 9-year-old to die in a freezing rainstorm is a crime. What we're doing, this is a civil intervention. We're taking you back to the scene of the crime. We're going to show you exactly what empty looks like when it's freezing to death on a rusted bench." We didn't give her a choice. Hammer and Biggs escorted her to the back of the support van, the same van where Leo was currently wrapped in 3 layers of wool, finally sleeping the heavy, exhausted sleep of a child who thinks he's been rescued. We didn't let her see him yet. We wanted her to sit in the back, in the dark, with nothing but the sound of the rain and the knowledge that 41 men were riding as her escort back to the hell she'd created. The ride back was slower, more deliberate. The sleet was turning into a full-blown snowstorm, the flakes fat and heavy, sticking to our goggles. We rode in a tight diamond formation, the van in the center. We were a rolling prison, a wall of silence moving through the night. As we pulled back into the city, back toward that same rusted bus stop at 4th and Main, the streetlights were flickering, casting long, rhythmic shadows across the pavement. I pulled my bike right up onto the sidewalk, my tires crunching over the thin layer of ice. The bus stop was empty now, but the blue sneaker print was still visible in the frozen slush. I opened the back of the van and pulled Sarah out. She was crying now, real tears of fear, her expensive coat fluttering in the wind. I marched her over to that bench. "Look at it," I commanded. "Look at the spot where he stood for 3 hours. He didn't move." "Sarah, do you know why? Because he believed you. He believed the woman who told him a midnight bus was coming to take him to a special school. He stayed here because he loved you more than he loved his own life." She looked at the bench, then at the empty road, and finally she looked at me. "I couldn't do it anymore! You don't know what it's like! He's different. He needs things I can't give him." "So you gave him the cold?" I asked. "You gave him a death sentence." "I thought someone would find him," she wailed. "Someone did," I said, pointing to the 41 brothers who had now dismounted and were standing in a wide circle around her. "But we aren't someone. We're the Motor Mafia, and we don't accept your resignation. If you think the police are the only ones who can deliver a sentence, you've never seen a biker jury in action." Sarah is standing at the very spot she tried to erase her past, and she's about to find out that the Brotherhood doesn't just protect the kid. We redefine the family. Hit that like button if you think this mother deserves to feel every bit of the cold she left her son in. Subscribe for the final part 4, where the authorities arrive, but the Motor Mafia makes the final call. Drop a DIGN white in the comments if you're ready to see how we ensure Leo never stands alone again. Sarah stood there, her body racked with shivers that had nothing to do with the temperature and everything to do with the 41 pairs of eyes pinning her to that bench. The sleet had turned into a heavy, silent snow, draping the city in a white sheet that felt like a burial shroud for her secrets. She looked small, pathetic, and entirely human in the worst way possible. "The police are 5 minutes out," I said, my voice cutting through the howl of the wind. "Biggs called it in as a recovered child and detained suspect. They're coming to take you to a cell, Sarah, and they'll probably talk to you about abandonment and endangerment. They'll give you a lawyer and a court date." I stepped closer, the snow crunching under my boots. "But that's their world. In my world, the punishment fits the crime. You wanted to be empty. You wanted to be free of the burden. Well, congratulations, you're free. You're never going to see that boy again. You're never going to hear him call you Mum. You're going to spend the rest of your life knowing that when your son was at his absolute lowest, he was saved by men you'd usually cross the street to avoid." Just then, the back door of the support van creaked open. Leo stepped out, wrapped in a massive biker vest that swallowed his small frame. He looked at the scene, the bikes, the brothers, and finally, the woman standing by the bench. His eyes didn't fill with rage. They filled with a quiet, devastating understanding that no 9-year-old should ever possess. "Mom," he whispered. Sarah took a step toward him, her hands reaching out, but Hammer stepped in between them like a wall of granite. He didn't say a word, he just stood there, a silent reminder that she had forfeited her right to touch him the moment she drove away. Leo looked at her for a long time. Then, he looked at me. "She didn't come back with dinner, Jax," he said, his voice small but steady. "No, Leo," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "She didn't. But look around you." Leo looked at the 41 men standing in the freezing night. He saw the ice on our jackets, the exhaustion in our faces, and the fierce, protective pride in our eyes. He saw Biggs holding a fresh bag of burgers we'd grabbed on the way back. He saw the Brotherhood. "You aren't waiting for a midnight bus anymore, little man," I told him. "From now on, you've got 41 fathers. You've got a clubhouse full of uncles who will make sure you're never cold, never hungry, and never, ever left behind." The blue lights of the police cruisers began to pulse against the falling snow, reflecting off the chrome of our bikes. The officers stepped out, their hands on their belts, confused by the sight of a motorcycle club standing guard over a crying woman and a kid in a leather vest. We gave them the note. We gave them the dash cam footage from our lead bikes. We gave them everything they needed to make sure Sarah Miller didn't see the outside of a prison cell for a long, long time. As they led her away in handcuffs, she tried to look back at Leo one last time, but Leo didn't look back. He was busy helping Biggs carry a crate of water into the van, talking about the cool engines he'd seen. He had already moved on to a world where loyalty wasn't a choice, it was a law. Today, Leo doesn't stand at bus stops. He rides in the sidecar of my shovelhead. He's got the highest GPA in his class, and every time there's a school play or a baseball game, the front 3 rows are filled with 41 men in black leather. We aren't just a club, we're a family. And we're a reminder to every coward out there, the Motor Mafia doesn't just find what's lost, we keep what's precious. Respect isn't given, it's protected. And in this family, we never leave a brother behind. This is Jax, signing off.